Box. It's time for a podcast.
It's Friday then. It's Saturday, Sunday. What?
You're listening to the Pitwall Girls podcast, hosted by Darlene and Adriana.
Weekend, but everything got spoiled. Like, there wasn't a single thing that didn't get spoiled for me. And obviously, being a Lando girly, that was sad.
Yeah, it was so funny. So on Saturday night, it was the wedding, and the race happened 3 a.m. Eastern time. So we had just gone back from the bar and the after party or whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try and make it through. I'm already up. I'm going to watch the race live. And I remember watching the first 10 laps, and then I think I fell asleep. And I woke up and Lando was leading the race and was 6 seconds behind. So I'm like, oh my God, what happened? And
literally what happened?
And I was like, I don't want to spoil it for myself. I'm just going to go to sleep now and I'll watch it in the morning. And then I was like, oh, of course. He had already pitted. And Lando hadn't pitted yet. So Lando wasn't actually leading the race in any real way. But
you probably were am I dreaming? Is Lando really leading this race?
I was I screenshotted it to make sure that I wasn't hallucinating. But then I woke up and rewatched the race and realized that he indeed had just not pitted yet.
Yeah, he did just one stop, right? Did you end up watching the entire race?
I did, yeah.
Okay. Let me grab something.
Okay.
I'm here. Well, I'm gonna just slide over. Yes, I am so excited that the next race is Miami and I will be attending. I was kind of what am I gonna go to? But then realized it's sprint again. Too much action. What did you think about this updated sprint format?
It was a lot to keep up with, especially with the time zones and not being able to watch all of it live. For me, it just happened to be a busy weekend, a wedding weekend. Yeah. So I feel if you have anything else going on during the weekend, it's hard to keep up with everything.
I think a lot of fangirls were busy given that Taylor Swift released 31 songs as well.
Yeah, a surprise 9 extra.
Yeah.
I know. So that was crazy too. But yeah, I feel it was fun. There's a lot to talk about. A lot happened in the sprint. Are always fun to have more opportunities for points and that kind of thing. But it is a lot to keep up with. This sort of takes over your whole weekend if you want to watch all of it.
Yeah, and I was watching one of the press conferences, I think, which one was it, after the race, and they were asking the drivers, what did you guys think about the updated sprint format? Did you like it? And they're like, we just kind of show up and drive. Who you need to be asking is the mechanics. This is very taxing on them. Yeah, it was taxing on the fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say maybe 3 sprints a year is more than enough.
I think so. 6 is going to be kind of crazy this year. So we'll see how the rest of them go. I mean, this is a fun track to have this sprint at, I think. We got to see a spoiler.
It's a beautiful track, that turn 1. Yeah.
Yeah, and, we got to see Hamilton on the podium. And so that was exciting. But yeah, maybe...
Hammer time.
Yeah, maybe limit the number of sprint races just for our own well-being.
Yeah, okay. Did you put anything on the agenda?
I just added to it a little bit.
I hadn't seen it. Okay, well, I'm going to keep this banter because it's good. But we can officially kick off. I'm Darlene.
I'm Nako.
And we are here to bring you everything Chinese GP sprint weekend, race weekend. There, you heard us say, there is a lot to go over. I don't even know where to start. I will say, I think McLaren does need to adjust their expectations of themselves. We need a little bit more confidence.
Every single time. They're we're not going to be good here, which it wasn't just them. Nobody really thought McLaren was going to be good here. There's the longest straight of the entire calendar in this third sector of the track. So obviously McLaren is not known for having a lot of straight line speed. So people expected them to not be very good here. And Lando definitely did not expect himself to be on the podium. I think he had a bet with his race. I know, pole for sprint and then on the podium for the real race. It was funny. I think he had had a bet with his race engineer that he thought he was going to be 35 seconds behind the Ferrari in the race, and that was not the case at all. So yeah, maybe a little bit more confidence.
Yeah, that would be nice. Even Andrea said that they needed to be more confident in themselves and increase their expectation. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But, you know, whenever they think a track will actually suit them, it doesn't.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's like a confidence thing or they just haven't fully figured out their car, which is a little bit concerning, but this week it ended up fine.
Yeah, that could be it too. Okay, so maybe we can start off with the grass being on fire. The grass just kept going off.
Just spontaneously combusting for some reason. Yeah, that was crazy. And this isn't the only track with like grass, you know, and F1 cars are sparking all the time. It shouldn't just combust. I think somebody was saying that the track might be like on marshland. So there might be some like gas being emitted from like the marshlands underneath. And maybe there was some sort of gas that was there. And that was why it was catching on fire. Thankfully, it was only really a problem in FP1. And then during the sprint quali as well.
Yeah. So for those of you who weren't watching, just a patch of grass started off like a spark and where there's smoke, there's definitely fire. I always say that about F1, and this time it was literally fire on there. Will Buxton had said something about he was there when they were first building the track, and it wasn't even because it was built like on marshland. So it took a while for the track to actually settle down, and there was a lot of bumps that they had to shave off. Okay, so that I guess makes sense.
Yeah, it was crazy to see just a patch of grass on fire. Then it was just like black next to the track. So yeah, I think they yellow flagged it in FP1, but then when it happened in sprint qualifying, it happened I think in SQ1, and it was at the very end, so they didn't have to. It didn't really affect that session.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else to be said about FP1?
Probably not, you know, just that it was the only free practice session of the weekend. So obviously the only time teams had to collect any data. But yeah, not too much to report back on that one.
Okay. And then we move on to sprint quali.
Yes. So sprint quali. So this year for the first time, like we explained in the sprint episode that we did last time, it was on the Saturday. So it was in the morning. No, actually, sorry. Sprint quali was on Friday after free practice, right?
And was, yes.
Yeah. And then, the sprint race itself happened on Saturday morning.
I'm just nodding along because I was watching these all at weird times.
Yeah, we were watching them not live, really, but it was like 2 a.m.
I was in a cab, like on F1 TV at the start of the sprint, and then I just gave up on it, closed my phone, did not need to watch.
Yeah. So sprint quali, a decent amount of action happened, I guess. So in sprint quali, Lando got pole. There was a little bit of kind of controversy, debate around his track time because it did get deleted off of the kind of screen at one point, and then they reinstated it. Yeah. So essentially what had happened was he went off track limits at the last turn during his kind of second to last lap. Right. And then he did another lap after. And so there is a rule that's on some tracks that if you go off track in the final turn, it might give you an advantage going into your next lap if you cut the corner and you're kind of like, or if you go over
momentum.
The corner, you have more momentum going into the next lap. And so on some tracks, they do have a rule where that is not allowed. And there's a lot of confusion around it. But I guess it was in the race director's notes for this particular track that it doesn't give you an advantage to do that here. And we saw with Lando, he was in the gravel, so it really didn't give him any advantage. I think it slowed him down. So because of that, that track time was reinstated, and he only got the track limits penalty for the track time that he had gotten on the previous lap, and not the one where not the final lap that he got the fastest lap on.
We saw a couple cars go off in that specific turn.
Yeah,
corner.
Max Verstappen also.
Carlos. So there was quite the drama during was Carlos, oh god, it's getting on mumbo jumbo.
Are you talking about when he spun out?
Yeah, and he was able to go back and qualify. Was that in the sprint quali or the real quali?
So I believe that was in real
sprint quali.
Let's fact check ourselves because the whole weekend is a bit of a blur.
This one we need to fact check. Oh, why isn't it in my notes?
I
'Cause
think
I
it
took
was
other
in
notes.
regular quali.
Didn't I write?
Yeah, I believe
think
that
it
was in regular quali.
Oh, so it was not in the sprint?
Yeah.
Okay. So did anything else juicy happen in the sprint quali? I was excited to see Joe in the top 10. The support he had from his fans, like, it was bringing tears to my eyes just to see how happy the fans were, how much they adored him.
It was really cute. And after the race too, he was getting really emotional.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first Chinese driver to drive at the Chinese Grand Prix, really big moment. Yeah. And I think also they'd said all weekend that this was the most amount of fans that they'd had come to this Grand Prix. In previous years, there were some years where, they didn't have the best attendance. And
I've heard
sure that Joe had something to do with that. So really exciting. I mean, he didn't have the best weekend, but just to see him get into the top 10 sprint quali was exciting.
Yeah. Well, he was definitely trying to deliver. Even though he was not going to get in the points, he still wanted to do the overtake. So, yeah, very nice home race for him. Well, Yuki didn't have the hottest of weekends. He was doing very great first few races, but he flopped in sprint quali, DNF in the race.
Yeah. I have heard that like a lot of the complaints that Yuki was having all weekend, like part of the time his DRS wasn't working, like a lot of the issues that he had sounded similar to the issues Ricciardo had previously. So it might just be random stuff with the V car, where Daniel was experiencing them before. Maybe Yuki was getting the issues this weekend. So we'll see if this is a trend or if it was like a one-time thing. And he sort of got saved in the real Grand Prix, I guess, by the fact that Ricciardo DNFs, which I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yes, we will.
So that
we're trying to stay on track.
But that, him having a bad weekend this weekend kind of coincided with Ricciardo not having a good weekend. So
yeah. Well, we will talk about that. So now let's hop into the sprint where our boy Lando starting on pole. Oh my God, you know what I was thinking actually? Remember how we asked ourselves, does winning a sprint count as winning a race? And if Lando would have won the sprint, it would have definitely counted as winning a race.
Yeah, it counts. It's his first win. Yeah.
I swear when I was like, oh my God, I have to bring this up because if he wins, he is a race winner.
Yeah.
But
alas,
the girlies were disappointed because Lando was not able to deliver. And I don't know why. I need to give him manifesting lessons. He needs to picture himself crossing the finish line first. Like it's like he almost can't believe that he can win. What do you think? Like explain what happened.
Yeah.
I was mad. I was big time mad.
I think he sometimes just kind of gives up a little bit, or he resigns himself to the fact that he can't win. So we saw a little bit of that maybe during the sprint. Yeah, I don't think we can really explain it. But I think, he made a couple mistakes. He clearly was able to learn from some of them. Yeah.
At the start, he got overtaken by Hamilton in turn before even the first turn. Yeah. He kind of got pushed off wide, and then he ended up like P6.
Yep.
Is that
I think so. I think
we
P6.
had a spicy radio between Charles and Carlos. So Carlos was, doing his thing, being the smooth operator he is. And he was overtaking, battling cars. And one of those cars happened to be Charles. And we heard a radio message from Charles saying, he always fights me the hardest. Like, we need to talk about this after.
Like, fights me harder than, like, the others.
The rest. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a little spicy. I mean, I can see why Sainz would want to fight Leclerc right now. Like,
this was my prediction.
He feels like he has a lot to prove. He wants to prove that Ferrari made a mistake. And the best way to do that is to beat Leclerc, who gets to stay on Ferrari next year.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
he does
I'm not surprised.
Talking on track. Yeah. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of this. I thought he was going to be disobeying team orders, but I guess he's been doing so well that
he hasn't had to. Yeah, he's been ahead of Leclerc just on his own merit, so he hasn't really had to do that. Yeah, maybe we'll see more of that if it gets a little closer.
Yeah. Okay. On to the next event of the weekend was
wait,
the
but we gotta
race
talk
quali.
about,
Oh,
before we get there though, we gotta talk about Hamilton
oh,
podiuming.
let's
I
talk
mean, I know
about
we
Lewis.
mentioned it, but like, because he didn't have the best regular qualifying performance, we gotta give him a bit of props. He still has it. I know last time, or a few episodes ago, you were disparaging Lewis Hamilton,
You
talking
said
about,
he washed.
but you also, were like, was he
I'm
really the
over
best choice for
him.
a Ferrari?
Yeah.
Like, so
I mean,
he's,
is he?
I
I
think he
don't
still
know.
has something in him, right? He
Okay.
was able to podium. He got P2 in the sprint, the first time he's been on a podium, any podium for a while. So I think that was great for him. Obviously didn't have the best rest of the weekend, but he had really great overtaking move and just really good race for him.
I think he does well when he starts at the front of the field. Maybe it is. I would love for it to be hammer time. I always want the best for everybody. We want good racing. So yes, Lewis came in P2. It was nice to see a little battle between Max and Lewis. I think the fans love that. I love that. Okay, can we move on?
Let's move on.
Let's move on. So we have made it to quali. Wow, the whole weekend, my friends are like, you're so obsessed with F1. Like, how are you always watching him? Like, it's a special weekend where there's extra races going on.
It's a special weekend, except next time is the same thing.
Yeah.
But you're going to actually be there, so it'll be a little different.
It'll be here, yeah. Well, it'll kind of be the same thing because I'll be at the events and then I'll have to come home and watch to see what actually happened. So, yeah, bear with us. Okay, quali. What is there to say about quali? Max got pole.
Yes.
Shocking.
And Lando actually didn't do that well in quali. So he started the main race P4, I believe, with Piastri right behind him. So the results for the qualifying, the regular qualifying for the Grand Prix was Max, Checo, Alonso, then Norris and Piastri.
Yeah.
So both McLarens ahead of the Ferraris, but also behind Alonso. So you had started to mention, because we got confused with which quali did this happen in, but in Q2 of the regular qualifying, Sainz spun out. And so there was a little bit of a drama after qualifying because Aston Martin,
the Spaniards.
Well, yeah, Aston Martin filed a complaint against Sainz because there's something in the rule book, I guess, that says that any driver whose car stops on track during the qualifying session or sprint qualifying session shootout will not be permitted to take any further part in that session. So essentially what happened was with around 6 minutes left in Q2, Sainz spins out and he really saved it. He could have been bang into the barrier, but he really did a really good job turning the car and making sure he just got stuck on the gravel and he didn't spin all the way into the barrier. And I think just his front wing had some damage and they were just able to replace it. But it did cause a red flag, so the session was stopped. And afterwards, so this meant that essentially Sainz got to re-enter qualifying after that happened. And
he makes it out of Q2.
He made it out of Q2, and Lance-Stroll got pushed out in Q2. So I think Aston Martin was really filing a complaint to try and get Lance-Stroll into the P10 position for the race. But, FIA ended up dismissing the complaint, saying that the teams had a meeting prior to the Grand Prix and agreed that the rule would only be applied if outside assistance is gained during the red flag. So if, marshals have to help the car help fix the car in any way.
He was able to get the car back to the pits, no problem.
Yeah, so that's why that didn't stand, and FIA had said that the same thing happened with Albon in Montreal in 2022, and that no teams complained at that time either, and there was similarly no advantage gained, so that was just dismissed. So that happened, and I think Logan Sargent also spun out in qualifying.
He brought out a yellow flag that messed up Joe's lap.
Right. Yeah. So
it was no longer
in
hammer
Q1,
time.
Point he had rules this year so that after the sprint race, you're allowed to make further adjustments to your car up until the beginning of qualifying. And so what a lot of people are surprised by was that Mercedes went a pretty different direction than what they had in the sprint, even though Hamilton was able to podium and get P2 in the sprint race.
Said he was not happy with his car and that it couldn't get any worse. So that's why they decided to go and make changes.
But it got worse. It got way worse. So yeah, it's kind of surprising that, like, yeah, maybe he wasn't comfortable with the car, but he did pretty well in the sprint. So maybe they weren't confident that it could go the full race distance. But it is surprising that they made such drastic changes to the car. And because there was no free practice sessions other than the first one that they had, and it was in pretty different track circumstances, like they really had no opportunity to understand what these changes would do to the car. So it is surprising that they didn't just go with a more similar setup to sprint that they had data for, rather than going with this new setup that, they really didn't know how the car was going to do. So it ended up not doing so hot for him.
Not benefiting them. Yeah, P18. But he did finish in the points. So he made up about 10 great places.
Yeah.
Not horrible.
Okay. No, not at all.
We have finally made it to the race.
Ooh, yeah.
It was a good race.
It was a really exciting race. Obviously, Max won in, pretty dominant fashion,
13 seconds.
There were two safety cars, which means that the cars were bunched up, and he still ended the race ahead by 13 seconds. So that just shows the dominance of the Red Bull. But behind him, there was a lot of action, a lot of overtaking, some tire strategy stuff, and a lot of chaos, which we can get into.
Yeah, let's get into it. So where should we? Well, something dramatic that happened was one of Gasly's mechanics he fell with the wheel. It was very dangerous.
Yeah, so I think the car just slipped off of the jack or something like that.
Yeah.
And so the tire was like falling onto the engineer. So that was really scary. Yeah, the mechanic. So that was super scary. I forget when that happened.
It happened fairly early in the race.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, during one of the race restarts, the second race restart, right?
Yeah, so we can kind of go back to what happened. So the first safety car, or the first thing that paused the race, I guess, and brought out the safety car, was Bottas's engine just failing on track. It wasn't due to a crash or anything. But yeah, that it was just yellow flagged for a while, and then they deployed a virtual safety car, which meant that teams wouldn't lose time if they had pitted. So a lot of teams pitted, and then there was a safety car, and then there was a restart. And then after the first restart is when the first set of chaos happened.
When did the second restart happen?
That was the only restart, I guess.
No, there was two. There was two restarts. Something else happened, and I can't remember what it was.
So the first restart was because of Bottas. Right? And so what happened was, during the safety car, that's when the Stroll and Ricciardo crash happened, which is what created another safety car after that. And then there was another restart after that.
No.
We're
missing something, because it happened I believe it happened during the second restart.
I think,
are you right?
On lap 23 was when the marshals were struggling to move Bottas's car. So a full safety car was deployed. And then that's when the cars were all bunched up, and the Stroll and Ricciardo thing happened. And then Kevin Magnussen and Yuki also collided. Yeah. And then
I have lap 24, virtual safety car, full safety car. Yeah. Perez went in the pits. Fernando goes to soft tires. And then I have restart, Stroll and Daniel.
That was on lap 26 was the restart. And that's when it crashed. And that's when another safety car was deployed.
Okay. I'm just thinking from Max's point of view, and I feel like he kept going, but let's tell them what happened. So during one of the restarts, Stroll completely rams into the back of Daniel Ricciardo's car. Daniel had Oscar Piastri in front of him, and when you were watching on TV, it didn't seem like Daniel hit Oscar, but he did. Oscar had
a lot of damage. The radio message was how that Piastri was asking how bad the damage was, and the engineer was significant.
significant damage. Yeah. And, you know, there's a lot of words thrown out, but Stroll thought that Daniel brake tested him. And I mean, I think that Stroll was completely at fault.
Stroll had said some idiot braked right in front of me, but which is crazy. But in the post-race interview,
they were in their safety car.
Stroll talks a lot about the concertina effect. So essentially what that is kind of like in any situation, it's what causes traffic jams. So it's like everyone's reaction time is kind of slow. So then it backs everyone up behind, you know? So he was saying that he didn't feel like he deserved a penalty, which we can talk about who got penalties after this race later. But he was saying that it was going to happen to someone, right? Like that's what his argument was that it was going to happen to someone. It was all bunched up. Someone braked. And spoiler, it was his teammate Alonso who had a little bit of an issue, which is why everyone got backed up. He locked up, and then everybody behind him, got slowed down. But yes, it happened to everyone, but everybody else was paying attention, and you're going at a safety car pace. Like, you're not going at full race pace. You had enough time to be able to see what was happening in front of you and brake, right? And he did not brake at all. If you look at his driver cam, like he rammed straight into Ricciardo, no signs of like braking. So I feel like
it wasn't a touch. It was like,
if he had at least braked, I think he might have still hit Ricciardo, but it wouldn't have been so bad that Ricciardo's like rear just went all the way in the air and completely damaged, and it ruined his race. He wasn't able to rejoin. I think if Stroll had been paying attention and braked, he might have still crashed into Ricciardo a bit, but I don't think the damage would have been so bad. Like, I think Ricciardo probably would have been able to rejoin the race. And if you look at Stroll's driver cam, like Ricciardo is in front of him. He's looking to the right. Stroll is looking like to the apex of the turn. I think trying to see if cars were going to start speeding up because the safety car was about to end. He was not paying attention to what was in front of him. So for him to say that it wasn't his fault is just crazy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's like you were going at a safety car pace. You should not have hit the accelerator or whatever they hit the pedal.
Yeah. I mean, if your reaction time is so bad that at safety car pace, you can't slow down when you see other cars in front of you slowing down, then that just means your reaction time is not good enough to be an F1 because, I mean, that's just crazy.
Pop off. Okay, and I'm so silly because I literally have in my notes restart, Stroll and Daniel, K-Mag puncture, Yuki spin, safety car deployed. So it was in the first restart, yeah.
Yeah, so you just briefly mentioned, so while this was happening, there was another kind of crash incident between K-Mag and Yuki. And so that DNF'd Yuki as well.
Yeah. And eventually Daniel had to retire his car as well. So there's 3 retirements, both V carbs, which we have heard now over the race weekend that they want to be referred to as V carb, not RB. So Visa, Cash App, Red Bull, V carb, both of them DNF.
That makes sense to me because that was very confusing with like, are we talking about Red Bull or the V carb? So I'm good with just calling them V carb.
So the V carbs were DNF, both of them. And it's a shame because Daniel was having a better weekend. He was in the points. He could have scored at least a point.
Yeah. It saved Yuki, honestly, right? Because now you don't have the clear argument that, Ricciardo had a better weekend than him or something. So Yuki's still, on average, doing better than Ricciardo. But yeah, really unfortunate for Daniel.
Yeah. And then, Stroll was given a 10-second penalty, which he does not think is fair, even though we just explained how he rammed into the back of somebody else's car. Like, I could have hit the brakes quicker than him.
Yeah.
And then we'll jump into the penalties.
I mean, do you want to jump in there, or do you want to talk about the rest of the race first? We can jump into the penalties and go back to the rest of the race.
Okay. Yeah, since we're on the penalties. So then Daniel Ricciardo has been given a 3-grid place penalty for the upcoming race, which is Miami, which I think is so unfair.
It's so crazy. So essentially what they gave him a penalty for is overtaking, or just a safety car infringement, overtaking Hulkenberg under a safety car. And I'd heard that, like, he'd been told that Hulkenberg kind of went ahead of him so that he, kind of went ahead of him back, essentially. But I think it's crazy because Logan Sargent did a similar thing where he also got a safety car infringement penalty by overtaking Hulkenberg. But he got a 10-second penalty for this race. So essentially, I feel like Danny Rick was being punished for the Miami Grand Prix because Stroll rammed into him. He couldn't finish the race, so he couldn't serve a penalty during this race. So he's getting punished for doing the same thing, essentially, that Logan Sargent did. But he's getting the grid penalties for Miami. So I think that's super unfair.
It's so unfair. And Miami's also sprint. Like, can he serve the grid penalty during the sprint? I know he can't, but I wish he could.
Yeah, no, I think that's, crazy.
Yeah. So the reason why he got the penalty is super confusing because he was in front of Hulkenberg. And then when the incident between Daniel and Stroll happened, Hulkenberg went in front of him. So then Daniel went back. So my question is, wouldn't it count as Hulkenberg having overtaken him as well?
And I think that's what Daniel Ricciardo was told by his engineer or someone. And so he thought it was fine to get his place back, essentially. And then he gets penalized for it. So, yeah, I think it's super unfair and kind of weird officiating.
Well, sad for Danny. The boy is broken.
Yeah, he just, it's cursed or something. He can't catch a break.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the race. That's as far as my race notes go.
Yeah, so essentially that's, that happened around lap, 27 or so. And then in lap 31, the race resumes. And then, lap 34, Ricciardo retires from the race. And after that, the race was, just happened as it did. And so if you want to go through the results real quick. So as we've mentioned, Max won, and then Lando was on pole or on second place, P2. And then Checo was third place, followed by Leclerc, Sainz, Russell, Alonso, who had the fastest lap, weirdly enough. And then Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, and Hulkenberg to close out the top 10. So Hulkenberg ended up in P10 in the points. He sometimes has a good performance like that. But this was a really interesting race where tires were a big deal. There was a lot of tire degradation. So the undercut was really powerful unless you're Lando Norris, who managed his tires when everybody else was struggling. And so he was able to make it a one-stop race, and he was on his first set of tires for a lot longer. Yeah, so he pitted during one of the virtual safety cars and then was able to extend that for a really long time and didn't have to pit until later. And so that really helped him.
He said something in the post-race conference how Checo and Leclerc battling each other actually really helped him because Checo had more tire degradation than he did. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And then Alonso, who did start the race in P3, he, finished the race P7. And like I said, he had the fastest lap because he took a really weird strategy choice where he, during one of the virtual safety cars, pitted to softs, which nobody else was doing. And the softs were not...
the commentator said, not fancied.
Not fancied. Not the fancied decision. But so he was on softs, and I think he might have done that thinking that nobody was going to be able to make a one-stop happen. So I think he was anticipating everybody having to two-stop anyway. So he might just go on the softs. And then if everybody who's on mediums or hards, is going to need to pit again anyway, I think he was trying to make that work. Did not work. It put him kind of further behind the pack when he had to pit again. But he pitted to mediums. And was able to overtake a bunch of people on the mediums in the last stint of the race. And because there was less fuel in the car at that point, I think that's why he was able to get fastest lap. But interesting strategy stuff. And this is the first time I feel like all year that we saw the strategy work in Lando's favor because we've had a couple strategy mishaps. So it was cool to see it actually working out, and he was able to manage his tires, and I was super excited by it.
Yeah, it was exciting. He redeemed himself.
Yeah.
He was so happy on the plane with Max, taking their little selfies, P1 and P2.
Yeah.
For him, that's a P1.
Yeah, I mean, It is unfortunate that that's a P1, but yeah, no, it was really great. And I know he had a little radio message for his mom's birthday. Just super cute.
So cute. Yeah, that was a race. Oh, fave, OMG, WTF, radio moments.
Yeah, do you want to start with the fave?
Yeah, I think my fave is the same as yours. So if you want to say it first.
Yeah, my favorite.
I'm seeing your notes.
Yeah, it was just Joe feeling all the feelings and the crowd just cheering for Joe. And like right after the race, he like crouched down on the track and he was like super emotional. And I thought that was really cute. And, you know, all weekend we were seeing the photo of him when he was like little and he got to go to the Grand Prix. So
in Ferrari gear.
Yeah, in Ferrari gear, yeah.
Yeah, I love seeing all the fans. I'm glad that they got to see a Chinese driver drive at the Chinese GP. So yeah, love that.
He didn't do super well, but every time he did have an overtake, the crowd went crazy. So that was super cute.
Yeah. Oh my God moments.
Yeah, for me, it was just the fact that it was a happy, oh my God, like, oh my gosh, the tire strategy actually worked for Lando this time. And he got onto the podium. So yeah, I already talked about that, but that was like my yay OMG moment.
I don't know if I had an OMG moment because I had to watch the race like in 3 parts. So I had a lot of time to process.
Right.
I can't think of an OMG moment. I can think of a few WTF moments.
All right, go for it.
Well, obviously Stroll ramming into the back of Daniel Ricciardo's car. That was insanity. And then I was seeing the message, like the team radios and like all the comments that were being made. I'm like, how is this okay, Lance? Like,
yeah. No, he is a menace and needs to be off the grid, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, you know, what was my oh my God moment of the weekend? Well, I guess we could have done the weekend. Lando getting pole.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
Silly me. Yes.
So my WTF moment, I also had several, but it was the fact that when Bottas's engine went out for the first safety car, they didn't immediately deploy a virtual safety car and they just yellow flagged it. And I think that's so dangerous. Like you saw shots of Bottas being on the side of the track right at a turn. So like other cars were like coming into that corner, you know, turning. If anybody like locked up or anything, it could have been really dangerous. And I know like in the past in Formula One, there has been fatalities under double waved yellows. Like yellow flags are supposed to slow cars down, but sometimes they don't fully, like drivers don't fully slow down, right? If they think the race is going to start right back up again, and they like are more likely to take a safety car seriously. And so the virtual safety car, when it was created, was intended to like be able to be immediately deployed when something like that happens, to make sure that everybody really like slows down. So I thought that was super dangerous. That was like my main WTF moment. Like just seeing Bottas, like none of the marshals were there yet. He's getting out of the car. And it looked super dangerous for him.
Yeah, super dangerous. They were saying like we are under double yellows, but there's a driver on track, like actually out of his car. Yeah, they need to get more concise with when they call things. Have you seen the video that's going around of Bottas walking back to the pit, but at that same moment, Red Bull was doing a pit stop and he just stops and like watches how they do it and he like nods and keeps walking away.
Oh my God.
It was hilarious.
I hadn't seen that, but I'm going to have to go look that up.
Yeah.
They did not do well in the pit stops again. So
yeah,
that team is kind of problems. I saw a Chinese fan that had a sign that was like, no, and it was like the really slow pit stop times. And then yes, like 2.8, 2.6, which I thought was funny because it was also realistic. Like the fan wasn't like saying, oh, we're hoping for like sub 2 second pit stop. So they were pretty realistic. They were like, we just want like
normal.
Normal pit
not
stop time.
like 20-second pit stops. Yeah. Okay. What else? Do you have a favorite radio? Ferrari and their alphabet strategies.
Oh yeah, so it was like plan D, and then it was funny because one of the engineer, I think, let it slip because you're not supposed to know what the plans mean.
He did say it. Yeah, he
like,
fully just said what it was.
He was like, one stop. No, I meant plan D. And so essentially, what plan D was for Leclerc to extend.
Yeah.
and to go on a one-stop strategy. But yeah, they're back with their alphabet soup of strategies. I feel like we
They
haven't
kept saying Plan
this year.
B so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
they kept saying it because Leclerc was a little nervous about it. Like, I think he was kind of going flat out and was accruing a lot of tire degradation. I was wanting to confirm that that's really what they wanted him to do. But yeah, we're like, oh, the Ferrari's plans are back. Great to hear it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, they didn't do too hot this race. I mean, they did, but not given like podium or anything.
I mean, Lando said himself he expected to be 35 seconds up behind Leclerc by the end of the race. So yeah, for them to be behind Lando is probably surprising to them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was our race recap. There's some news to go over. We didn't go over it last week, but
wait, can I quickly mention though another random thing that happened was that Lando didn't park his car at the end of the race in the P2 spot, and he parked in the Park Ferme spot, and that was hilarious. And I think in the post race,
he had to back up.
He had to back up, and in the post race room where they go, where they call it the Verstappen podcast or whatever. He was wearing the P3 hat. So he was wearing a P3 hat. He didn't even know where to park. He was all over the place.
He said, I had got it and everything ready to leave early. I didn't think I would be on the podium. I hate those comments from him. It's we need to think we are the winners. We cannot be thinking I'm going to get on my plane and leave earlier. Maybe that's why he left in Kelly's seat on Max's plane, because his accommodations were we're out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you see? Kelly commented, hey, that's my seat. Yeah. Also, F1 released the team rankings, and I believe Aston Martin's in the 4th place. And somebody commented, wow, can you imagine where Aston Martin would be if they had 2 drivers? Basically saying Lance is non-existent.
Though, yeah, and people said this last year too, and I really think that's true. I think that, they need to kick him out.
We will see. Okay. Anything else?
For the race, no, I think that was it.
Yeah. So speaking of Aston Martin, Alonso has signed a 2-year contract with them, and it looks like he will be racing there for 2 years, but with the hopes of somewhat having a advisor role with the team. So he's really committed to Aston Martin.
Yeah, and I think he said that this is the longest contract he's had or something.
I heard that. You never had a contract longer than 2 years? Longer than a year?
Yeah, I guess a lot of times F1 contracts are shorter though, so maybe it's not that weird, but yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess we're in a new era where Charles Leclerc gets 6-year contracts, which might be a curse for him, but okay. And then in other news, our Carlos Hot Chili Pepper Saints is a hot commodity and everybody wants him. So, of course, we have a helmet Marco making comments again, which we hadn't heard from him in a little while. But he said that Carlos has a very lucrative deal from Audi, which cannot be met or matched or beat or whatever. And then the very next day, Christian Horner comes out and says that they have no idea what the Audi deal is. So who's making up stories? I'm going to say it's Helmut Marko making up the story.
I'm sure they're rumors and mumblings, but nothing official. So Horner was probably just trying to be no, we don't actually know anything. Even though maybe. With secret channels, they hear intel, but they're not really supposed to. So,
well, also because we haven't heard from Carlos or Audi say we've offered him a seat, we've offered him a contract. That's all mumblings. And then also, it seems like Mercedes might have something drafted for Carlos as well, just in case. I don't see him going to Mercedes.
No. And I mean, for Audi, it would make a lot of sense for them to want, signs. They're entering into F1. They don't want to start off their new era of F1 with Zhou and Bottas as their drivers. I think they want to be a strong constructor. They want to enter F1 with the bang. And I think getting a top driver like Sainz would make a lot of sense for them. So they probably are offering him a lot of money, to try and make that happen.
Yeah. Okay, what else is going on in news?
So the other thing that we've talked about a little bit was that they're contemplating a new point system
Yes.
So we have talked about this in previous episodes, just our own preferences. I personally think that all 20 drivers should be given points, make all of the battles matter. Because even in this race, we saw so many battles and overtaking and all that happening in the back half of the grid. And, right now only the top 10 get points. So what's being discussed now is for the top 12 to get points. So
I'm so
P1,
on board.
P1 would still get 25, but they'll make some adjustments somewhere along the way. So points will go down all the way to P12. Yeah, I'm on board. I mean, I still think that they should just give everybody points. But, I mean, I think the top 12, we saw last year Yuki getting P11 so many times and nothing to show for it. And I think it is weird for, so much money goes into these cars, so much competition happens all up and down the grid, and for only the top 10 to ever get points. It's just hard to know who's better. I think it would be fun to be able to compare Williams and Haas and Alpine to each other and really figure out which team is doing marginally better. But right now you have no indication of it because they all just get 0 points.
Yeah. I am super on board for this point system. I do agree that I wish all 20 drivers got points, or maybe top 18 or something. But again, that F1 posted the ranking of the teams, and Alpine went up a spot, but the last 3 teams have 0 points, but it has the little green triangle. And somebody commented, how did Alpine go up a spot and they still have 0 points? And obviously they're taking into account where the drivers are finishing. So probably Gasly and Ocon have finished higher than both the Williams drivers in races or something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, classic F1. A lot of the fans are against this change. They really want it to be P10. Yeah, just the 10 get points. And, a lot of people have been talking about how it used to be 6, only the top 6 got points. So there's a lot of opinions out there, but I think it would just make it more fun and competitive up and down the grid to have more points available.
Yeah. You think someone in the FIA is listening to our podcast?
If you are, please take our opinion into account.
Yeah. I mean, this was very timely when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other news? It's been a lot to keep up with, guys.
Yeah. And honestly, if there was other news, I was just having a hard enough time keeping up with this whole weekend. So if there's any news we missed, we'll pick it up next time.
Yeah, we have a breather this weekend. There's no race, so we get a break. So maybe we could do a fun podcast and just report any newsers. I feel like there is going to be news because it's an off week, so contracts might be getting signed.
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer to the summer, so silly season will be upon us.
Silly season.
Which I feel like it's kind of been silly season all
It never ends.
Yeah.
It never ends. God, I'm hoping Lando gets his win in Miami.
Oh, if you get to see it.
I
you just get to be there,
I'll FaceTime you. So the first year I went to the race, they let the fans on track, and we ran, and we got to see it was Carlos on the podium, I think, and Max.
Yeah. No, it's really fun to rush helmets. The track.
Yeah. They made them wear weird helmets and stuff.
The football helmets, right? Yeah. No, that was a weird thing. And there was a police escort, and it was kind of a weird vibe.
Yeah, big spectacle. So we'll see how it is with the sprint. Okay, anything else? No?
Well, did you want to do the Formula 101 this time, or do you want to save it for next time?
We could save it because you explained something else, so that will be it. And that was actually me who didn't know what it was. I don't even know if I responded to you. Well, let's just do it. So Lando's engineer texted him and said, we suggest you... What did I say?
He said texted.
No, he did not do that. No texting and driving.
During the race.
Lando's engineer radioed him and said, we suggest you use engine brake between one of these corners. And he responded like sassy Lando, no thanks, mate. Or we'll not do that. Yeah. So I had a feeling that it meant something along the lines of it being automatic braking, but I texted our tech genius, Nako.
So essentially what the radio message was that the engineer was recommending that he use engine braking in the slow corners where there was understeer. So a little Formula 101 on oversteer and understeer. Oversteer is if you imagine a car drifting, it's when your rear tires are kind of drifting and the front has grip so that when you're turning, you might turn more than you wanted to because the rear is slipped. So that's oversteer. Understeer is when the front of your front tire slips. So if you're trying to turn and your front tires slip, so that you might not be able to turn as much as you wanted to. So you're going a little bit straighter than you wanted to into a corner. And so you end up going wide or something. So they were essentially saying, so essentially for oversteer, you can overcorrect, right? So if you're kind of drifting, like you can kind of overcorrect and then you can get back to where you want. Understeer, there's not. So then for understeer, there's not much you can do to correct understeer, but one of the things you can do is to brake. And so they were suggesting that he could use engine braking, which is instead of going onto the brake pedal to brake and slow down by downshifting or just, putting off the throttle so that the car slows down. And Lando was like, nope, because what that would do is when you engine brake, it puts more pressure on your rear tires. So essentially like to stop the understeer and to stop the rear tires from slipping, you slow down to try and get the tires to not slip as much. So that puts more pressure on those tires. And so that it ends up with more tire degradation in the rear. So he was probably just like, nope, don't want that. I'd rather deal with the understeer than to deal with my rear tires degrading more heavily than they already are. So that's a little Formula 101 and oversteer, understeer and engine braking.
Got it. Thanks for that explanation. Yeah, I didn't really know what it meant, but I knew you would know, so thanks. But it was funny how he responded. It wasn't like no, it was like very sassy, like,
no, not. Thanks.
Yeah, like no, that's a horrible suggestion, basically. Yeah. Okay, well, as always, thanks for listening. Make sure that you are subscribed to our podcast wherever you listen to it so you get notified when new episodes are released weekly. Leave us a fabulous review. And if you're watching on YouTube, do all the YouTube things like subscribing and leaving comments. And come chat with us on Discord, which we still need to revive. Bye.